My parents cut my hair while I was sleeping, so I would not look pretty at my sister's graduation. That night changed my life forever. I did not know it yet, but that was the night I stopped believing that being quiet and kind would protect me. That was the night I learned that sometimes the people who are supposed to love you the most can hurt you the deepest. And that was the night I decided I would never let myself disappear again. I woke up in the middle of the night feeling very cold. The cold started at the back of my neck and slowly moved down my body. It felt strange, like something important was missing. The room was dark and quiet. Everyone else was asleep. I could smell something sharp in the air, like metal. It was a smell I knew very well, but I did not understand why it was there. My hand started to shake as I reached up and touched the back of my head. My fingers did not feel what they were supposed to feel. My hair was not there. I moved my hand again and again, hoping I was wrong. Then my eyes opened wider, and I saw long dark brown strands of hair spread across my pillow. They looked like pieces of something that had been taken away without permission. I jumped out of bed very fast. My heart was beating so hard that my chest hurt. My legs felt weak, but I forced myself to walk. I slowly walked across the room and stopped in front of the mirror. I was scared to look, but I had to. The mirror did not lie. The long hair that once reached my back was gone. I had spent almost 10 years growing that hair. I washed it carefully. I brushed it gently. I protected it like it was part of my heart. Now it was cut badly. The ends were uneven. Some parts were short. Some parts were longer. It looked messy and ugly. It did not look like a haircut someone would choose. It looked like someone wanted to ruin it on purpose. This was not a style. This was not a mistake. This felt cruel. I turned around and looked at my room. My mind searched for answers. Maybe someone broke into the house. Maybe a stranger did this. Maybe I was dreaming. I hoped with all my heart that this was not real. Then I saw something that made my stomach hurt. On my desk were a pair of scissors. They were placed neatly like nothing bad had happened. I knew those scissors very well. My mother used them to cut paper, coupons, and old bills. Next to the scissors was a small yellow note. I picked it up with shaking hands. The handwriting was messy, but I knew it right away. It was my mother's writing. The note said, "Don't worry. Short hair makes you less noticeable. Today is Amory's day. Don't be selfish. Sign, Mom." I did not cry. I did not scream. I did not move. It felt like all the sound in the world disappeared. My ears rang, but there was no noise. My body felt empty. After a few seconds, my knees could not hold me anymore. I fell to the floor. I picked up pieces of my hair and held them close to my chest. It felt like my dignity, my pride, and my feelings were cut away while I slept. No one asked me. No one warned me. No one cared. At that moment, I understood something very painful. Sometimes the people you call family are the ones who want you to be smaller. They want you to disappear so someone else can shine brighter. They believe love is something you must earn by staying quiet. They thought cutting my hair would make me silent. They were wrong. This story is not about a girl who hides. This is the beginning of a girl who learns to stand. But before I continue, hit the subscribe button and tell me where are you watching this from, and what time of day is it. My name is Sorrel. I am 23 years old, and I learned something very early in life. Fairness does not always exist inside families. There were 4 people in my family. My mother, my father, my younger sister Amare, and me. But it always felt like there were only 3 people who mattered. Amare was the special one. Amare was the favorite. From the time we were small, Amare was treated like a shining star. She had big bright eyes and a smile that made people look at her twice. She spoke loudly and proudly. She liked attention, and attention liked her back. When guests came to our house, my mother would bring Amare into the room like a prize. She would talk about Amare's ballet lessons and her French classes. She would smile so wide it hurt her face. Everyone would clap and praise Amare. And me. I stayed in the kitchen washing dishes. Or I stayed in my room, quiet and invisible. If someone asked about me, my mother would say, "Sorrel is a good girl. She never causes trouble." People would nod, and then they would forget about me. I learned very early that being quiet made adults happy. I learned that asking for attention was wrong. I learned to step back and let others stand in front. Amare had piano lessons when she was 5. I wanted lessons too, but my parents said there was no money. So I went to the library. I borrowed old guitar books. I taught myself slowly, one string at a time. Amare had beautiful dresses that sparkled. I wore clothes from cousins in old bags. They were too big or too small, but I said nothing. I believed that if I was good enough, helpful enough, and quiet enough, my parents would love me more. I worked hard in school. I got straight A's for 12 years. When my parents met my teachers, my mother smiled politely and said, "That's nice." Then she asked why I did not try something fun like a beauty contest like Amare. When I won a scholarship that paid for a whole year of school, my father looked at the paper and said, "Good, but don't talk about it. Amare is sad today." I remember the first time Amare was heartbroken. Someone stopped following her online. She cried loudly. The whole family stopped everything. My parents ordered food. They hugged her. They stayed up all night making her feel better. I sat in the corner studying for exams. No one asked how I felt. When Amare was chosen to be in a magazine, my family invited everyone over. They made a big poster of her picture and hung it in the living room. When my hair grew long and healthy, my mother frowned and said, "That length hides your face. You shouldn't stand out." I did not wear makeup. I did not ask for attention. But deep inside, I wanted someone to see me and say, "You are beautiful too." Amare's graduation day felt important to me. Not because I wanted to compete with her, but because I wanted to feel like I belonged. I bought a navy blue dress with money from my part-time job. I took care of myself. I imagined walking into the room feeling confident and proud. I was invited to speak as a student mentor. I thought this was my chance. I believed that if I did well, my parents would finally look at me with pride. But instead of support, they felt afraid. They thought if I looked beautiful, Amare would look less special. They thought I was a problem. That night, my mother came into my room with a cup of tea. She smiled softly and said it would help me sleep. I felt surprised because she had never done that before. I felt included for the first time in years. I drank the tea. When I woke up, my hair was gone. One side of my eyelashes was cut too. I did not recognize myself. I screamed, but no one came. When I went downstairs, my parents told me not to make a scene. They said Amare needed a perfect day. They said I was a distraction. At that moment, I felt empty. Not angry, just empty. I turned on my phone and started recording everything. I listened to old recordings. I heard words that hurt but now made sense. I understood that this was not a mistake. This was a choice. This was not about hair. This was about control. This was about erasing me. I locked myself in my room. I sat on the floor. I held my hair. And I made a promise to myself. I would no longer wait to be chosen. I would choose myself. I would no longer stay silent. I would stand up. I would exist. And this was only the beginning. I called Leora almost at 6 a.m, and my voice was shaking so badly that the words came out weak and broken, because my chest felt tight and my heart was beating too fast. And the phone rang only 2 times before she answered. And Leora was the only person in all my 4 years of college who truly saw me for who I really was, not as someone's eldest daughter who had to be responsible, not as Amare's shadow who had to stay behind, not as a girl who should always be quiet and grateful, but as a real person with her own thoughts, her own feelings, and her own worth. And when I whispered, "I need you," I did not need to say anything else at all because she did not ask questions and she did not waste time. She just said in a steady voice, "Send me your location." And only 15 minutes later she arrived at my door, and when she stepped inside I still had not washed my face and my eyes were swollen and sore from crying, and my hair was uneven and torn and hanging down in strange pieces like it was accusing me of something I did not understand. And Leora stopped right at the doorway when she saw me and stood there without moving for a few seconds, and then she slowly walked in, gently closed the door behind her, and placed her hand softly on my shoulder like she was afraid I might break, and she asked quietly, "They did this to you?" And I nodded because my throat hurt too much to speak, and I handed her the note my mother had left on the table, and then opened my phone and let her listen to the recordings I had saved from last night, and also the ones I had accidentally captured over many years. And in one clear recording my father's voice could be heard right after I left the room saying, "She thinks wearing a nice dress will make her better than Amare. Wake her up, Dagger." And then my mother's voice followed, cold and sharp like ice, saying, "Cut it, that hair makes her think she has value." And when Leora heard these words she did not speak at all, and she just sat there very still and took deep slow breaths, like she was holding back anger and sadness at the same time. And after a long quiet moment she looked straight into my eyes with a calm and strong look I had never seen before and said, "We are not staying quiet, not this time." And in that moment I knew she would stand with me even if everyone else turned away. And we sat together on the bedroom floor as the first light of morning came through the window and filled the room. And we began to make a plan that was not about yelling or screaming or hurting anyone back, but a plan built on truth and clarity and honesty. A plan that would show what really happened in a way no one could deny, and the first step of the plan was my hair. So Leora took me to a small quiet salon where an old woman named Maria worked, and Maria gently touched my uneven hair and looked at me with kind eyes and said softly, "You have not lost your hair, you are only beginning a new version of yourself." And within an hour my hair was cut into a clean and neat bob that framed my face and let me see myself clearly for the first time in a long while, and Leora stood behind me and watched through the mirror and whispered, "Now you look like someone who could burn a whole house down and still walk away smiling." And for the first time in almost a full day I laughed. And after that we worked on the speech because I had been invited to speak at the graduation ceremony as the lead mentor for a scholarship program that helped girls who came from hard lives. And before everything happened I planned to say only polite and kind words, maybe thank some people and say something hopeful. But now I rewrote everything because I no longer wanted to talk about perfect families and happy homes that did not really exist for everyone. I wanted to tell the truth about what can happen behind closed doors. And we chose some recordings that were short and clear and easy to understand, and Leora suggested making a short video with them that was only 45 seconds long because that was enough to make people stop and listen. And then we talked about what I would wear, because Amare would surely wear a big shiny dress with glitter and layers and bright colors to make everyone look at her, and I did not want to compete with that at all. I wanted to be simple and honest, so we chose a plain white suit with no bright colors, no extra jewelry, low heels, and a simple watch, and Leora looked at me and said, "You don't need to shine, you just need to show up." And that evening when I stood in front of the mirror in the dressing room and looked at myself, I no longer saw a weak and scared girl. I saw a woman who had lost her hair and lost her trust, but had never lost her worth. And we saved the recordings on 3 different USB drives and sent one to a lawyer Leora knew, and saved another in an email, just in case someone tried to delete or hide everything. And by night the plan was complete, and no one knew I would be there, and no one knew I would speak, and no one knew I had proof. And I was not looking for forgiveness or praise or love. I only wanted the truth, and I wanted to be seen. And the graduation ceremony was held in a very large hall with a high ceiling and warm golden lights that made everything look important and serious. And rows of chairs were filled with people, and soft music played in the background, and cameras flashed everywhere, and dresses sparkled like colorful wings. And when I walked inside at first no one noticed me, because I was just a girl in a plain white suit with calm eyes. But as I walked down the main aisle people slowly began to turn their heads because they felt something different even if they did not know what it was. And when I passed my family my mother sat in the middle with my father and Amare beside her. And Amare wore a shiny red dress and looked proud and confident, but the moment my mother saw me her smile disappeared and her face turned pale. And Amare smirked because she thought she had already won and believed I was there only to support her. But she did not know that I was not there to support anyone but myself. And when my name was called, and I stepped onto the stage, the bright light made my hands shake and my heart pound. But I remembered everything that had happened and took a deep breath. And I began with the normal opening words that everyone expected, and there was light clapping. But then I stopped, stepped forward, and the room became completely silent, and I said clearly, "This is my hair, and it was cut while I slept by my own mother." And gasps filled the room like a sudden wave, and I played the recording and my mother's voice echoed through the hall, and people whispered to each other and pulled out their phones and some covered their mouths in shock. And I spoke again and said that some families do not hurt you with their hands, but hurt you by erasing you and making you feel invisible. And I looked straight at my parents and saw Amare frozen in her seat and my mother staring down at the floor. And I said that no one can cut away a person's worth no matter how hard they try, and then I walked off the stage without applause, but the silence was heavy and strong and louder than clapping. After I stepped down, people came to me one by one and thanked me and told me they felt seen and understood, and the video spread very fast on the internet, and millions of people watched it and shared it. And news stations sent messages and schools talked about it, and many organizations reached out, and I received an email inviting me to speak for girls who had been ignored and hurt in their own homes. And as I stood there reading it, my hands trembled, not from fear but from the feeling that my voice was finally free, and this time no one could cut me down, no one could erase me, and no one could pretend I did not exist anymore. 3 days after the graduation ceremony, people on the internet started noticing something strange. On a website called Reddit, someone found a secret account named Mrox199. This account had been posting very mean comments under every post about me. People wrote things like, "Don't believe her. She's jealous. She loves drama. She always acts like a victim." At first, I didn't know what to think. It was strange to see someone saying such harsh things about me, and I wondered why anyone would do that. But then, users on the forum connected the account to the same email that had been used to order Amory's graduation dress. That was the moment it all started to make sense. Everyone online realized that Amory had been behind the mean account. Soon, a hashtag about Amory's behavior started trending. People everywhere were talking about what had happened. Brands that had worked with Amory for her graduation ads quietly removed her name from their websites. Even a big makeup company posted a statement. They said, "We do not support bullying or emotional harm, whether inside families or in public." I read the statement and felt a quiet calm in my chest. It wasn't happiness or revenge, it was peace. Finally, people were seeing the truth. Amory's boyfriend, who was studying photography in college, posted a short story online. He wrote, "I didn't know she hated her sister that much." Then, 1 week later, he unfollowed Amory on social media. He also posted a photo of himself alone at a light festival. There were no matching rings in sight. It was clear that their relationship was over. I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt only clarity. The world was beginning to reflect what I had always known inside. My parents tried to stay quiet about the situation, but they couldn't. An email circulated from the school board, confirming that both of my parents were under investigation for causing emotional harm to a student, especially in the academic environment where I had served as a mentor. Some people said they saw my mother crying as she left the disciplinary office. Others said my father had a shouting match with a professor in the cafeteria. I didn't confirm these things. I didn't follow up. I didn't need to. I knew they were experiencing, for the first time, what it felt like to be seen through a lens that was not soft, not forgiving, not protective. And me, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt calm. I felt at peace. When my graduation video hit 10 million views, I finally allowed myself a small moment of reflection. 5 days later, I received a message from a girl in Ohio. She wrote to me, "Sorrel, you gave me the courage to leave home. My mother used to tell me not to do anything that would make my sister look bad when people compared us. I used to think it was my fault. Now I know I'm not crazy. I'm not ungrateful. I was just never allowed to shine. Thank you." I finished reading the message. I didn't cry. I didn't need to. I simply closed my phone and looked out the window. The sunset light poured into the small room that Leora and I had rented. It filled the room with golden hues, painting my face with warmth. My hair was short now, but my eyes were sharper than they had ever been. Someone had once told me, "Hair can grow back, but trust, once it is broken, never reconnects the same way." I understand this fully now. I no longer believed in family the way I used to, but I had begun to believe in myself. I learned something important during those months. Sometimes it is not that you were cut out of someone else's story. Sometimes it is that you are meant to rewrite your own story, in your own voice, for everyone to hear. And you never need to apologize for standing tall and speaking up. 3 months passed since I had stepped down from that stage in my white suit. The room had been full of hundreds of stunned faces. The silence had been thick, like the heavy curtain that fell at the end of a performance. From a small video recorded on a phone, my story had become what many people called a wave of awakening in the community. I didn't see it in such dramatic terms. I saw it simply. For the first time, I had been seen as myself, not as a shadow, not as someone who was always behind. Invitations began pouring in. The university sent a formal apology email. A television network invited me to speak on a program called Education and Family Emotions. But one invitation stood out from all the rest. It was from a national conference about educational fairness and injustice in families. The theme was the forgotten children. When family dims your light. I knew I could not turn it down. I stood on a large stage, facing hundreds of people. There were educators, psychologists, parents, and students. The bright lights no longer scared me. The microphone no longer made my hands shake. I told my story not to accuse anyone, but to shine a light on what thousands of other girls have been forced to hide. I spoke calmly, with no dramatic highs, no tears. Each word carried weight. Each word cut quietly into the hearts of those who had ever thought, "It's just a family matter." After my speech, a woman came up to me. She introduced herself as the creative lead for a big international education brand. She explained that they were launching a global campaign called No More Side Characters. This campaign was about honoring those who had been pushed out of the spotlight simply because they didn't fit the role someone else had written for them. She offered me the position of campaign ambassador and lead content strategist. She said, "We don't need a celebrity. We need someone who has lived in silence and knows how to use truth to wake up an entire room." I accepted without hesitation. A few weeks later, I moved to a small coastal city on the West Coast. The morning sun was gentle, and the ocean breeze made it feel like anything could begin again. I used the first round of funding to open a mentoring center for young women who had experienced emotional abuse or image control from their own families. Leora moved in with me. She became the creative advisor and community engagement lead. We were no longer just two students sharing a dorm. We were two women building a space of light together, a space where no one needed permission to be seen. The building was only 3 stories tall, modest in size, but each room had big windows facing the park. The walls were painted a warm ivory color. Above the door we hung a small, elegant sign. On the oak front door, I had a brass inscription engraved. "Your worth is not in the length of your hair, but in how fully you have lived your truth." On opening day, we invited everyone who had reached out to me over the past 3 months. A girl from Texas came. She had been forced to drop out of school so her brother could afford tuition. Another young woman from Arizona came. Her mother had always called her invisible because she didn't look like her beautiful sister. They came carrying old wounds, but they left with brighter eyes and warmer hearts. I didn't seek revenge. I didn't wait for the downfall of those who had hurt me. I realized that the thing that truly makes you shine isn't winning in front of someone who tried to silence you. It's standing in the very room that once broke your voice and walking through it with your own words intact. I no longer had long hair cascading down my back, but I had eyes that looked forward without flinching, feet that didn't tremble, and a life I no longer needed permission to live as my true self. Maybe that was the kind of light they could never cut. The grand opening happened on a bright Saturday morning. The air was crisp and fresh. Sunlight poured through the sheer white curtains like a gentle new breath. The crowd wasn't very large, but it was enough to fill the main room. Community friends, young women who had messaged me after the video went viral, and even a few former professors quietly arrived. Leora stood at the reception table, guest list in hand, her eyes shining with conviction. I was talking to a 17-year-old girl when the automatic glass door slid open. The room grew still, like the wind had changed direction. I turned my head. My family had arrived. My mother walked in first, wearing a muted cream outfit and dark sunglasses covering half her face. She moved slowly, as if each step was on thin ice. My father followed silent. His shoulders were slightly hunched, hands in his coat pockets, eyes avoiding contact. Amare trailed behind, her pastel dress wrinkled slightly, high heels unsteady. She looked down at the floor. The room held its breath. Some people recognized them, but no one spoke. I didn't move. I stood still, my hand gently resting on the wooden table near the entrance. I watched them like a painting I once knew well, but now felt too distant to touch. My mother approached slowly. She removed her sunglasses. Her eyes were red, but she wore the same soft smile she had always used to smooth over moments she couldn't control. "We're proud of you, Sorrel," she said, her voice steady but hollow. I smiled quietly. A soft, breezy smile. Inside me, a peace so vast and deep lay untouched by anyone else. "I'm proud too," I said. My father stepped forward slightly. "Family can always forgive one another," he said. I turned and walked over to the reception desk. On it sat a small wooden box. I placed my hand gently on it, then looked back at them. My eyes were steady, unwavering, as if no past could change the present. "If you want to apologize," I said, "write it clearly on a feedback card. Here, feelings aren't swept aside like hair on the floor." A wave of silence passed through them. Amare turned slightly away, my mother blinked repeatedly, my father pressed his lips together tightly. No one wrote anything. In the end, they left quietly just as they had arrived. This time, I was not the one left behind. This time I was ahead, leading something far greater than anyone they had left. When the glass doors closed behind them, it felt like the last dark cloud had finally cleared from my mind. No shouting. No confrontation. I had won. Later, after the grand opening ended, I returned to my office. The room was quiet, lit only by the soft glow of the wall lamps. I poured myself a cup of tea and sat in the single chair, facing a painting I had hung on my first day. It showed a woman standing in an open field, her hair flying against the wind, her face hidden, but her posture upright, backlit by a burst of golden light. I thought about everything that had happened. The night I woke in panic, hair scattered across my pillow. My mother's eyes said, "Don't make a scene. This is Amory's day." The graduation stage where I stood and told the truth, a truth no one had dared to say for years. And that morning, when my parents stood at the door of the mentoring center with nothing but dark sunglasses and unsaid apologies. I used to think long hair made me beautiful, that if I grew it long enough, kept my body slim enough, spoke gently enough, I would be loved. I believed my hair was a ticket into a world where I could finally be seen. But in the end, it was the moment I dared to stand up, with nothing on my head and my trust completely stripped away, that I truly began to shine. I want to send this to you, the one watching this story. Maybe you are sitting quietly in a room where no one listens. Maybe you live in a family where you feel like the background, so someone else can stand in the spotlight.